Welcome to Candid Chats on Cancer. I'm Mary Robinson.
And I'm Jamie Moore. Mary, we have a really beautiful guest tonight.
Yes, we do, and she's cute and pregnant. Jenny Bachman's here today, and we're so excited to hear about your survivor story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fill us in on everything before you deliver on set.
Not going to deliver today, I promise you that.
I love it.
How many
Reveal.
months pregnant are you?
Well, 36 weeks, so I think that puts me in my 8th, 9th-ish month.
Wow.
So,
So that means we got about 28 minutes before you deliver?
yeah, I promise we won't have that kind of show.
Okay, good.
And I'd have
don't
to
wanna
ask,
have
is
that.
it a secret on what it is?
It's going to be a little girl.
Oh,
how
yay.
exciting. That is exciting.
All right. This is miraculous. Tell
Yeah.
us why.
So I was 23 when I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. I didn't go to the doctor feeling sick. I went for my annual exam, and my doctor, who was a new doctor, kind of felt around and was like, something's kind of off here. I'm going to order an ultrasound. And then I went to the ultrasound the next day, and I saw the screen, and when they got to the tumor, they put a bunch of question marks on the screen. And I went, okay, something's wrong, because the ultrasound tech is not
Yeah.
saying anything, and there's question marks. That can't be good. So I left the office, and then they called me, and they're like, you have a tumor of some type, or it might be a cyst. You got to come in and do blood work. It could be cancer. And I was on my way to work that morning, and so I pulled
Don't
on
you
the
hate
side of
it
the
when
road.
they call you? I mean, I shouldn't
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that, but I'd rather get told in person.
Well, I think they were just time is of the essence and wanted
Yeah.
to get me in that day to come do blood work. So I called my husband, and he was at work and he didn't answer. So I called my mom, and I was like crying, thinking they just
yeah.
told me I could have cancer. And I thought, I just went in for my annual exam, right? It's my first job out of college. I finally have health insurance that's in network. And I was just like really confused. So anyway, I went and got the blood work, and then came back negative. So I was like, we're in the clear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went to the doctor like a week later, and she was like, we need to remove this tumor. And I said, okay, like a couple weeks from now, months from now. And she's like, next Wednesday. I was thinking, and I was like, why are we so urgent here?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I have a job, I have to get time off. And she just said, you know, we don't know for sure that it's not cancer. And I said, well, the blood work was negative. And she's
Right.
like, blood work doesn't always tell the story. So then we talked about, like, what does this mean? What kind of surgery is this? And they told me that if they went in there and they found cancer, they were going to give me a full hysterectomy right there on the table.
Right.
I was 23. We were 4 months away from my wedding.
Oh, no. Really?
And so I looked at my to-be husband and said, like, we wanted to have kids someday. Like, don't I get a say in this? And she
Yeah.
said, my doctor is very blunt. I love her because I'm also very blunt. But she said, yeah, your choice is, do you want to live or die? And she goes, because if we go in there and there's cancer everywhere, we've got to remove everything.
Right.
And I was like, well, given those choices, I guess I choose to live.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll go forward, we'll do the surgery. So we scheduled the surgery, and in the week between the surgery, I called my husband's friends, and I said, look, he wants to be a dad. If this is not what he signed up for, like, get him out now.
Right.
Like, I don't want to marry him and trap him, and then he's in this life where he can't have kids. And of course,
4 months before her wedding.
Yeah,
I
Right.
mean,
4
that
months
had to
before
have
our
been
wedding.
really hard for both of you.
Yeah, and so he, of course, said, no, I'm in this, like, let's go forward. So we had the surgery, and I woke up, and I immediately was like, all right, what's the verdict? Like, what do I have? And they're like, it wasn't cancer. So we just took your one ovary and your fallopian tube, and you're good. And I was like, great. So went home, and that was on a Wednesday that they removed the tumor. And then Friday, February 1st, my doctor called me, and I was like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, I hate to tell you this over the phone, but it's really important. Your results came back and there's cancer. And I said, what? And she goes, and I know you're not listening to anything I say now because
Right.
you heard the cancer word. She goes, but I'm calling you because I have called a gynecologic oncologist. They're going to get in touch with you. We need you get you in Monday, talk about next steps, and start getting you on the road to whatever that means. And I was just like floored. I hung up the phone, and my mom and my grandma and my sister were there, and my niece, who was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 at the time. And I was like, they just called and said it was cancer. I'm like, how am I going to tell Nick,
Right.
who's my husband? And I just, like, I don't know how to tell him. So
We had just been told that you didn't have
yeah,
cancer.
and we thought
Exactly.
it's all fine. So we prepared like dinner that night, and we all sat down to a family dinner. And I said, so I don't know how to tell you, but doctor called today, and it is cancer. Surprise, because
Yeah.
how do you deliver terrible news like
And
that?
do you want ketchup with your meatloaf?
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
maybe he's thinking it was April 1st, April Fool's
Yeah,
Day.
April Fool-
I mean, really.
Yeah, and so I said surprise, and then
No
my
kidding.
3-year-old niece immediately started singing happy birthday, because that's what she was
She's-
used to. Like, you say
yeah.
surprise, and then you sing happy
Oh.
birthday. So it relieved the tension.
Aw.
But anyway, so I went to a gynecologic oncologist, and they sent my tumor for a second opinion, and it ended up coming back stage 1A, grade 3. My second opinion came back grade 3, and
Okay.
since it was grade 3, they wanted to do chemo,
Right.
because that's aggressive, and they wanted to do another surgery to determine the staging, I guess, was probably in the middle of there. So my first surgery was January 30th, and then I was recovering from that, and they wanted to do another one, and I said, well, I'm getting married May 3rd, so when can we fit this in? So they
Right.
fit it in the beginning of March, and we did the surgery because it's 6 to 8 weeks recovery. And then they came back with a diagnosis, and they're like, we need to do chemo. And I said, do you lose your hair when you do chemo? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, I'm not doing it until after I get married. And they're, you really can't delay something like that. I go, I'm not
Right.
going to be a bald bride. Like, it's not going to happen. And they go, okay, well, right after you get married, we're going to start chemo. And I said, right after my honeymoon that's already planned, you're going to start chemo. And my doctor's like, okay, but not a day later. So we came home from our honeymoon, and the next day I started chemo.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I did 6 rounds of a carboplatinum Taxol
Okay.
combination. I was allergic to Taxol.
Oh, yeah.
So my first round went fine. And then my second round, I started having allergic anaphylactic reaction.
Right.
Apparently I turned purple. I felt like I was gonna just vomit.
Scary.
Yeah.
But my mom like left the room screaming for the nurse, and they came in and pumped a bunch of stuff in my IV and stopped the Taxol. Third treatment, they tried to desensitize me by using a ton of steroids,
Right.
and it didn't work. So then my last 3, I just had carboplatinum. And the Taxol is what caused me to lose my hair.
Right.
But since I only had 3 doses of it,
You didn't lose
my
all of
hair
it?
came back relatively quickly.
Good for you.
So I wasn't bald for very long.
But did you lose it all then?
I did.
Oh, okay.
I kept my eyebrows and my eyelashes, but all my hair was gone. So that was,
Can we go back to the beginning a little
Yeah.
bit? The lab test that you had that came out negative the first time around, what kind of lab tests do they use to look for ovarian cancer?
CA125.
Okay.
That's the general marker that's in the blood, and mine's always come back negative. So as part of my checkups since I've had cancer, they always do that, but I don't know that I find it as a valuable test
Right.
because it's never shown anything.
Could that, not that you're a doctor or anything, but you have a very rare form of cancer though, right?
I had a mucinous tumor for ovarian cancer. I don't know how rare it is. I think the thing with ovarian cancer is it's usually found in postmenopausal women.
Right.
It's not usually in women that are young, and it's usually found grade 3 or stage 3 or 4 when there's not much you can do. So finding it at stage 1A is like impossible.
Right.
And I
So
had
that's
asked her
really
too, if you had any signs and symptoms before we got on the show, because I just think it would be, I've always heard that ovarian cancer is really hard to figure out or diagnose.
Yeah, it is. And looking back, I had all the signs and symptoms, but they're all signs of your regular like menstrual cycle, bloating, feeling nauseous, feeling like an upset stomach, or not feeling hungry.
Right. So basically like every other bride-to-be?
Or like every
23-year-old?
Yeah. So I mean, there was nothing that stood out as this doesn't feel right. I was 23. I was working nights. I was eating crappy food. I'd always been an athlete. I wasn't working out, and I was just like, I'm getting old and not taking care of my body.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel good. I'm super tired because I'm not taking care of myself. I need to eat better. I need to work out. And so that's what I was trying to focus on. I didn't think anything else of any of the symptoms. And it was really probably my then boyfriend that was like, man, you always say you don't feel good. And I said, no, I don't. And he's like, seriously?
Right.
And so I was like, all right. But even then, I mean, it wasn't a symptom that when I went to the doctor, I said, and by the way, I always feel bad. I was just, yeah, I'm here for my annual exam. Like, check
Yeah.
it out.
But did you say that you actually felt something, a little bit of something?
I could. So I could feel something in my belly, not quite the belly I have today. But I could feel something, and I could kind of feel it shift. But I thought at certain times of the day or certain, times it wasn't there as much. And I called my family members because, that's what you do. You consult your family, not a doctor.
Right.
And I said, I think I have like this kind of like mass in my stomach, but I don't think it's there all the time. And I have family members that have Crohn's disease or irritable bowel.
Okay.
And so everybody's like, I'm sure it's just,
Yeah, it's one of those
related
two.
to digestion. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, I have some of those issues too. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Then I'll just watch what I eat and again, try to eat better. So I convinced myself it was nothing. But you could feel the tumor. It was
Right.
8 inches when they removed it. So it was like
Believe
Okay.
that?
this big.
Wow.
And quite sizable. I apparently looked like I was 6 months pregnant, though no one ever asked me like, are you 6 months pregnant? But after I got it removed, everybody's like, I could tell you were a little thicker in your belly, but I didn't want to ask. And I was like, well, thanks.
Yeah.
I think.
Thanks for saying
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, wow, that sounds crazy. And I have to ask, since she was getting married and she didn't want to lose her hair,
Yep.
if it was me, I know that I'd be thinking in the back of my mind, like, oh my gosh, I got to have this chemo, and I just don't know if it would consume my life, even though I had all these plans to get married. Because, you waited 4 months, was it?
Yep.
And I don't know if I could have done that. Yeah.
I don't know
So
if I could
how
have
did you
either.
get through that?
I mean,
Or
I
did
think
you
I
not
just
think about it?
I was trying to work a lot to make money to pay for my wedding.
Right.
So I think I was like heads down, just going through the motions. I wasn't really worried about chemo. I don't know that I had ever really known anyone that went through chemo to know what I was really getting into.
Right.
I was recovering from surgery, so my incision goes hip to hip, so it's quite large. So I was, learning how to bend, and I just got my first puppy 3 days before my surgery.
Puppies. We love
which-
puppies.
Yeah, it was the dog I had waited for my whole life, and so I was learning how to be a dog mom.
Yeah. So what kind of
and,
puppy you have?
I had a Saint Bernard.
Okay, that's a small horse. That's
Yeah.
not a puppy.
Well, but she was only 24 pounds or 27 pounds, something like that,
Aw,
when she came home. So
Just
she
a
was
big ball of fur.
Yeah, and they grow really fast. So we were learning how to take care of a dog and juggling work and then
Right.
planning a wedding. So I don't know that we worried about it. Definitely on my honeymoon, I remember like sitting in the airport on the way home going, can we just like not go home?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to start chemo and I don't want to lose my hair. I didn't know how fast you lose your hair. So I was at my first treatment asking the nurse all these questions, and I'm like, so how fast do I lose my hair? Will it be a couple months? And she's like, you're gonna be bald by your second treatment. And I'm like, that's in 3 weeks. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, I didn't know that. Okay.
So
Let's
what'd
do
you
it.
do to prepare yourself for that? Did you get a wig or?
I did. We went actually after that treatment, just across the street to Bravada's and got a wig, which was terribly expensive when you just paid for a wedding. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
But we got a wig, and then we got a bunch of like bandanas and stuff from like Walmart, so that had scarves.
Yeah.
Then my hair started to fall out, and I was training this guy at work, and I didn't want to tell him what I was going through. So
Right.
like I crafted my hair up in this like bun all week so that you couldn't tell that it was falling out. And then as soon as he flew back home, I shaved my head, and we had a little party. where it was myself and my husband shaved our head, and
Yeah.
my nieces were there, and we were trying to teach them that cancer wasn't very scary.
Right.
But they, of course, being children, were very honest and said, Aunt Jenny, I liked your hair the other way. And I said, yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
And then, the remainder just fell out over the course of a couple days, and that was it. But losing your hair, being a woman, I'm
Right.
sure it's hard as a man too, but definitely makes you feel less feminine.
Right.
I generally wear jeans, but I found myself wanting to wear dresses and skirts all the time just to try to feel a little bit more girly.
More feminine?
Yeah. So that was something I didn't anticipate or expect.
So your husband went bald with you?
Yeah, his didn't last quite as long, and he didn't go like down to the skin bald, but we definitely buzzed him.
Good.
My husband actually surprised me in the hospital, and he did go skin bald.
Oh.
And I didn't know he was going to do it. So when he came in, I was like,
I can't imagine him skin bald. That'd be
what
scary.
happened to my husband? No, I'm kidding.
I was a swimmer in high school.
I would have thought the same thing.
Yeah,
I
but
was-
how sweet.
And we
right?
used to always like shave the guys' heads before the state swim meet.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
I always remember like how many nicks and cuts they got all over their head. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that to my husband.
Yeah,
I
I
was
don't
like,
blame you.
I can't do it.
But that's love, right?
That is love.
That's love. Yeah.
So, talking about love,
Yeah. So then fertility was like a whole nother thing. We
so you okay, so now to kind of get caught back up in the middle, they took one ovary out of you.
Yep.
And then you started chemo.
6 rounds of chemo.
And after chemo, what happened?
Then we just went to my regular checkup. So for the first couple years, I went and got checkup every 3 months. Every 3 months they do like an exam, and then every 6 months they do an ultrasound. And we just kind of went that way for a couple years. My oncologist ended up moving away to Texas, so I had to find a new gynecologic oncologist, and I went to one of her partners who at my first visit was like, are you planning to have kids?
Yeah.
And I think I was maybe 25 at the time. And I was like, yeah, someday, but like not right now. And he's like, okay, well, we'll talk when you're ready. And I said, well, I want to know what you have to say. And he's like, okay, well, I mean, you're probably going to have fertility issues, probably not going to be able to get pregnant naturally, and just laid all this stuff on me. And I was like, okay. And then he's like, oh, and you probably want to wait until you're 5 years cancer-free, so then you'll be around for the life of your child. And I'm sure that what he said was all fine,
Yes.
but it was
And he meant well.
and he meant well, and he probably actually said it in a nice way, which in my mind I've now, like 11 years later, tortured into this different thing.
Yeah.
But it just, I hadn't heard it before, and I didn't expect any of that. So I left the appointment in tears. I called my husband, and I'm like, this guy told me I'm gonna die. He told me we can't have babies. Like, I need you to fly me to Texas every 3 months
Yeah.
to go see my old doctor. And he's like, well, do whatever you want, Jenny. Like, we can get frequent flyer miles. And I'm like, okay.
Oh.
Well, then I happened to cross another gynecologic oncologist in a different office.
Right.
And I was like, I'm just going to go see her and see what she has to say. Full transparency, I'm a little bit sexist when it comes to my
That's
gynecologic
okay.
oncologist.
I
I feel a
can
little more
understand that.
comfortable with a woman.
And I do too.
I
I
fully
mean,
understand that.
You know.
Yeah. And so I went and saw her, and I went and told her my history, and I told her about what the other doctor said. And I said, so what's your opinion? And she said, one, we don't know if you were fertile before.
Right.
We don't know for sure that you are now. Like, we're going to have to see. You don't make a decision to have children based on how long you've been cancer-free. You make it because it's the right time in your life. It's a big decision.
Right.
And so I felt better. So I switched doctors, and I still had in my head that 5 years cancer-free was what I wanted,
Right.
because I didn't want to leave my husband with a child to raise on his own. And then my doctor was like, well, at 7 years, we'll drop you down to a 1-year appointment instead of every 6 months. And I
Right.
said, well, I thought 5 was the magical number. And she goes, I feel more comfortable with 7. And so 7 became our number.
Okay.
So then when I was 30, we decided like we're gonna try to see if this whole kid thing works out. We had got our traveling done and we're ready to kind of settle down, I guess.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. So we were 6 months into trying and we weren't pregnant, and I just mentioned it at my checkup and she said, well, I'm gonna send you to a fertility specialist. And I was like, do you think that's aggressive? Because I've known people that try for years. And she's like, you're ready, let's just not mess around,
Yeah.
let's go. So she sent me to a fertility specialist, specializes in people that have had cancer. And they did some tests on me and my husband, and they said, we don't really see anything wrong,
Okay.
but we think you might have a blockage in your remaining tube because you've had 2 surgeries in
Scar
there.
tissue or something.
Yeah, and we can do an exploratory surgery, but if we find a blockage, we're gonna end up doing IVF, or we can just go straight to IVF. And
Okay, for us guys, what is an IVF?
so in vitro fertilization,
Okay.
where they harvest the egg and then they take the male sperm and they kind of get everything together in a petri dish and then insert it back in.
Okay.
So it's, in my mind, it was the most aggressive form to fight infertility, and it's very expensive,
Yeah.
like $10,000. I had great
Wow.
insurance,
Wow.
but I mean, there was still gonna be some out-of-pocket cost. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go that extreme.
Yeah.
So we, said, okay, thanks, but no thanks. We're gonna keep trying and just see if like you're wrong and maybe it just works out.
Right.
And then, for anyone that struggled with fertility issues, it's hard on a relationship to not care but care and try to figure it all out. So I got to the point where it was a lot on me.
Yeah.
Work was crazy. And I went to my husband and I said, we just need to go all in or be all out. Like, go for the IVF, try, and then if it doesn't work, then we'll just have lots of puppies.
Yeah. Big puppies.
So we called the doctor back up and we said, okay, like we're finally ready. We're gonna go forward with this IVF. And they said, okay, well, that's great. Just call us when your cycle starts and then we'll start doing the hormones and all the getting it ready. And I said, okay. And we had a vacation planned to the Bahamas in the interim. So we were like, you know what, we're just gonna go and enjoy.
Yeah.
And then we came back and my cycle never started because we just conceived naturally. So we didn't.
Bahamas will do it every
Oh,
time.
yeah,
I know.
relaxation.
And
Here we
it was
come.
actually cheaper than IVF.
Oh, I'm sure.
No worries, Mon.
Yeah, and so
love
That
it
is
all worked out
great.
with that one, and then this one was the same thing.
Oh, wait a minute, this one.
This child.
So other ones you have, so
Yep.
that one was conceived in Bahamas.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't get
And-
another trip to the Bahamas, unfortunately, for
Oh,
the second one.
Really?
No.
But, so you are not expecting, this is your second one.
This is my second.
And your first one happened to be a boy,
Yep,
correct?
we have a little
And
boy
this
named
is gonna
Walter.
be
This is
a
gonna be a girl.
Yep, and then we're done.
Congratulations to
Yeah.
you. And the second one was conceived normal also.
Correct.
Was that one, you think, easier the second time?
I think it was. I think we were less hyper
Maybe
about it,
worked
I
up.
guess. Yeah.
Stressed,
And
yeah.
just, we took the approach of, we're going to give ourselves, a year and a half window. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, we have our one son and that's plenty.
Right.
So, I mean, there wasn't as much pressure in the relationship.
So you
Yeah.
wouldn't have done the in vitro at that point?
Nope.
You would have just been
No, we
content.
definitely decided like, if it happens, it happens. If not,
We got
we're good
one.
with one.
How old is he?
He is going to be 3 in April.
Oh my God.
That's exciting.
That is remarkable.
And so are you going to be done after this, or are you going to try
Yes.
for some more?
No, we are done. I've actually talked to my OB and my gynecologic oncologist about, while I have to have a C-section,
Right.
and why they're in there, could they just take care of it so they don't have to have any more kids? And there's new research that ovarian cancer actually starts in the fallopian tube
Really?
and then travels up to the ovary. So generally, if you are done having children, they recommend that you remove the fallopian tube instead of like
Just
they used to
cutting it.
tie it. So we're going to try that, and pending there's no complications during the C-section, that will be how we make sure there's no baby number 3, and prevent any further risk of ovarian cancer.
I have a question. Just because I'm curious, so if they take the fallopian tube, you're still going to have your ovary?
Correct.
So will your body still have that hormone then?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if you needed the tube to do anything.
Nope.
I'm a female, but I don't know
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, my sister actually decided, I think last year or 2 years ago, that she was done having children as well. And she went to her doctor and said, you know, my sister had ovarian cancer. At that time, I had not finished all the genetic testing, so I had just done the BRCA 1 and 2, and it was negative. But after you have someone in your family with cancer, everyone's always a little hyper that what if
Right.
there's a genetic link? What if I'm going to get it? So she talked to her OB about it and said, I don't want to have any more children, and my sister has ovarian cancer. What do you think about removing my tubes? Like, I'll just tie them if you think that's the best course of action, but what do you think? And he said, well, the surgery's not a whole lot different, and why not, for peace of mind, do it? You do have this family history. So she actually had her tubes removed and has had no issues
problems.
since.
Good for her.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So now, how are you preparing for this baby?
Getting the house ready, all the clothes ready. I think my biggest hesitation is how is the other little one going to handle
Yeah.
a new little one, right? That's sharing all the attention.
So how are you keeping your immune system nice and strong?
Well, I have a almost 3-year-old in daycare, so I'm not. I think we're constantly always fighting a battle of some kind.
Yeah.
But I just celebrated 11 years from my tumor removal
Oh my God.
on January 30th.
Congratulations.
So, I mean, I've luckily been very healthy and haven't had a lot of issues since then. So
That's
I
wonderful.
don't focus on too much.
So basically, ovarian cancer, you beat that,
Yep.
got it again, beat it again, had chemo, had babies 3 years old, and we successfully just did a full episode with you, and you didn't deliver on stage.
That's my biggest accomplishment.
Yeah, it is.
Yay.
Jenny, thank you ever so much for
Yeah,
coming and joining
thank
us and
you.
telling
Yeah,
us
it's
our
been a
story.
real
I mean,
pleasure.
That's a remarkable story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So have
And
you
best
come up with a
wishes.
name yet for the little one?
I have, but I'm not going to share.
Ah, my wife
Surprise.
was, I almost could have got $5 out of my wife. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And join us again for another Candid Chats on Cancer.
Yeah, be well.